Welcome back, AP Gov students. Today is Chapter 4 of Keeping the Republic, titled Federalism and the U.S. Constitution. If you don't have Keeping the Republic, it's fine because the content is still going to be the same. I'm going to be going over all the key terms and notes for this chapter to help me get a 5, so I encourage you to take notes along as well. Legislative branch, lawmaking body of government. It creates national laws through a bicameral voting system that balances out the influence of the entire will of the people and the will of each state. The legislative branch is Congress. It's the House and the Senate. It's the place that laws are proposed and where laws are passed. Executive branch, law enforcement body of government. It executes the national laws as ordered by the president, as well as its large bureaucratic network. The bureaucracy is a huge part of the executive branch that isn't really known as much because the president is such a figurehead. But the bureaucracy is really important. There's a whole chapter on the bureaucracy that I'm going to go into a lot later. But a huge part of the executive branch is just responding to the legislative branch laws that are passed, and the president and the bureaucracy decide how they're implemented and how the laws are supposed to be achieved, and the goals that are outlined in the laws, how do you approach and eventually get to those goals. Judicial branch, law interpreting body of government. It rules on how and if laws are broken and on the constitutionality of written laws. A huge part of AP Gov is the last part, the Supreme Court cases, how it rules certain things constitutional and unconstitutional. There's a ton of required cases that are going to have to be, mastered basically by you guys. And case law is just a massive part of AP Gov. Judicial review, the power of the court to determine the constitutionality of laws. The power greatly expands the importance of the Supreme Court and allows it to check other branches of government. Judicial review is the main power of the Supreme Court, and it wasn't even one of the original powers of the court. It was created through decisions in cases. But this allows the Supreme Court to strike down laws that are unconstitutional through a case-by-case basis. And this is one of the most influential powers in all of government. Separation of powers, independent branches of government. It prevents the government from becoming too powerful by making the different functions of government entirely separate from one another. So the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch all have different powers, and they don't have a lot of connections to each other. So this allows each branch of government to check each other and make sure one of them isn't becoming too powerful. It's almost like they're competing for influence in government, and this prevents one part of government or the government as a whole from becoming all powerful. It's sort of like how factions on the people level they're all in a space where they have to compete with each other. This is how the government is. Checks and balances, ability of the branches of government to watch over each other. It prevents one branch of government from becoming too powerful and allows the government to essentially control itself. Judicial review is a main checking power because they can strike down actions by the legislative and executive branch as unconstitutional. The executive branch has a lot of control over how laws are implemented, so the legislative branch isn't all powerful in lawmaking. But the legislative branch has to make laws. The executive branch can't just make their own laws and enforce their own laws. It's all a check and game between the branches of government, and this prevents any total control. Necessary and proper clause, Congress can do anything if it provides justification. It greatly expands the power of the legislative branch beyond what is specifically written in the Constitution. This was established by a Supreme Court case. Basically, it gives Congress a lot more discretion in what it can make in terms of laws. They don't have to listen strictly to the Constitution. However, the Supreme Court can strike down laws if Congress takes this clause a little bit too far. Supremacy clause, national government trumps state governments. It declares that laws made by the national government overrule those made by lower governments. This expands the power of the national government over the state governments in the federalist structure. The state governments can make a lot of their own laws, but if they come in conflict with national laws, then the national laws take precedent over them. Concurrent powers, powers shared by levels of government. It gives both the state and federal levels authority over specific areas, allowing for cooperation. So in federalism, this is kind of cooperative federalism where both the national and state governments work together on certain issues. McCulloch v. Maryland, case deciding on whether a state can tax a federal bank. It upheld the constitutionality of Congress establishing a national bank and expanded/fortified the necessary and proper clause. So even though the government didn't have explicit power to make a national bank was needed, and deemed as necessary to support the economy, so they are allowed to do it. And Maryland as a state couldn't fight back against that because Congress had the authority to make the bank. Gibbons v. Ogden, case deciding on a state's influence on interstate commerce. It ruled to expand the powers of the national government in regards to the Commerce Clause, giving the federal level more power over regulating interstate commerce. This is, I believe, not a required case, but McCulloch v. Maryland is. This basically just said that the national government has power to regulate commerce between states, and states don't have that power because you're going across state borders for economic actions, so it's sort of seen as like a federal thing. So Congress has the ability to regulate interstate commerce. Nullification: a state can reject a federal law it feels is unconstitutional. It gives grounds for states to reject federal laws, although it is not a recognized power by the federal government, which causes it to be the basis of many government conflicts. The nullification crisis really comes to a head around the Civil War because the states, especially the slave states, started rejecting national government actions. Categorical grants: federal money in exchange for direct compliance. It is the more controlling type of federal funding that demands states to do specific things with the money. So the federal government will fund state programs, but the states have to do exactly what the federal government says they need to do with the money. Block grants: federal money in exchange for pursuing a common interest. It is the less controlling type of federal funding that allows states some freedom in deciding how the money is used. So basically, the federal government will give money to the states and they say, I want this to be used to better education, or I want this to be used to promote, I don't know, healthcare or something. And the states have more autonomy in over how they use that money to achieve that goal. So some state might pump a lot of money into their elementary schools, and another state might pump a lot of money into their high schools. Things like that. They have more control over how the money is used, and that's what the states want and prefer. Unfunded mandates: federal demands without any funding. It is the least attractive federal mandate from a state's perspective, as they are given no funding to pursue a goal coming from the federal level. So the federal government will tell a state, you have to do this, and they don't even give them any money for it. They just say, you need to take whatever resources you have and achieve this goal. Unfunded mandates kind of disappeared from American politics because there's a lot of compromises that were written, I'm pretty sure, in like the 90s, 80s, 90s time, that didn't allow unfunded mandates to be used as often. Initiative, referendum, and recall: ways citizens can influence government. They give alleyways for citizens to affect government on a more direct level, specifically in the legislative branch. It is helpful to know what each term means, but I don't think it's really necessary. You can just drop these 3 words in like an essay or something and use it as an example of how citizens can participate in democracy. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next chapter, and goodbye. Yo, if you're super cool and awesome, you should follow my Twitter, or X if you're that kind of person. It's @Clark4724. I post a lot of random stuff on there, but I also post channel updates, and one of my next videos are coming out. So if you're gonna keep watching my channel, then I recommend you follow, and thanks.